Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm Andrew Seaman, the LinkedIn news editor focused on job search and careers, welcoming you to another wonderful episode. As always, I want to start the show by asking you to introduce yourself in the stream. I already see a lot of people doing that. I think it's Kavish from India, Harlisha from Compton, Spencer from LA, and Gori from Algeria. So keep introducing yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're looking for in the job market, what type of job you're looking for, what industry you're looking for. And then what I want you to do is, as you see everyone introduce each other, connect with one another. One of the best things I hear after the show is from people who say, hey, I linked up with someone who said that they are looking in the industry that I work in, or they work in the industry where I want to move into, and they end up job searching together. Networking is such an integral part of job searching, and there's no better time to start than now. So be sure that you're connecting with each other, you're talking with each other, and you're helping each other. And then obviously, once you do that, please get your questions in. We're going to be talking all about job searching today. We have a wonderful expert here that I'll be introducing in just a moment. So we'll talking about resumes, strategy, and everything in between. And we have so many questions that already came in, but make sure that you get your own questions in too. So put them in the stream and we'll be pulling them out. So first, I want to welcome our expert, who's Melanie Denny, who is an award-winning resume writer and someone who maybe you might know as Mel the Mentor. So welcome, Melanie.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So, you are well known for being a resume writer, but you know so much about job searching overall. But so many people need help with resumes and their CVs. So maybe we could chat a little bit about some of the biggest mistakes that you see on people's resumes. So what is the biggest mistake that you see when people give you their resume?
For me, I think the biggest overall mistake that I see is that people simply do not sell themselves. They drop some tasks, they copy and paste their job description, slap their name on the top, and call it their resume. And that's really a big mistake because a lot of people do that. And so now all the resumes sound alike, you don't stand out, and we don't understand your value. We don't know what you're good at. You're not telling us your success stories or your accomplishments. And so you just blend in with everyone else. And now it's so important, more important than ever, to make sure that you stand out. And so the biggest mistake is definitely not taking the time to really understand what you're offering and articulating how you are going to be of value to a company.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, one of the things I hear from a lot of people is they get frustrated when they apply for a job where maybe they meet all the criteria, they meet all the requirements, and they don't know really why they're not getting called back. And it might be a case where, you have to just stand out from the other people who also meet the criteria. So I think that's such great advice. And for people who maybe struggle to do that on their resume and marketing materials, like their cover letters, how do you suggest they do that in a way that's not over the top? So how do you sell yourself on a resume or your marketing materials?
Yeah, so the best way is to really, first of all, take a moment to reflect on your career. We're so caught up in, oh, I need a job now, or we're just ready to apply, that we don't take that time to prepare, right? So sit down. When's the last time you sat down to your career, really reflected on what you've done, what you're good at, what you want to be doing next, right? So taking that time will help you understand, okay, what do I do here? Right? And yeah, let's say you are in sales and you do cold calling, right? So a bullet might read, cold call business owners to sell XYZ product. Cool, that's what you do. But now sit and think about how that adds value, right? So yes, you make these calls, but so what? So in asking that so what question, you dig deeper into the reason behind why are you calling these people? To generate revenue, right? So now the bullet needs to be transformed into generated X amount of dollars through cold calling. So that's the difference. And the difference is really, again, showing how what you do is of benefit to an organization. Cold calling is fine, but cold calling within itself is not valuable. What's valuable is the result of you making those phone calls. So
Yeah.
think about it in those terms, in terms of results.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. And I think also, people sometimes struggle with that, about the quantifying what they have. And that's why I always suggest to people, when you're in a job, even when you're not job searching, make sure you're keeping a file somewhere of your accomplishments or things that show your metrics. That way, when you are sort of forced to do a job search or you're in the middle of building a resume, you could go to that file and say, oh, I got this much profit, or I led this much increase in engagement, or something like that. That way you don't have to sort of scrounge for it. So it's almost like proactive job searching.
Yep, absolutely. People will just wait till the last minute until, oh, I need a job, right? And they don't take the time. So yeah, definitely keep up with it. September is International Update Your Resume Month. So it's
There
a
you
good
go.
time to reflect and say, okay, let me update my resume. What have I done over the past year?
And,
Yeah.
and there's only a few more days of September, so make sure that
Right.
you're updating your resume out there. And let's get started with some questions. We have a ton of people who are joining the stream. We have, I think it's Jason from Colorado, Andrea from Florida, Dolores from Texas, Judy from Boston. I know we have a bunch of questions coming in already. And one that I want to get off to the races with is basically one that came in a little bit earlier before the show from Melissa. And this is a question I think a lot of people have is, do hiring managers look at cover letters? And I assume this is a question you probably get a lot.
Yes. I mean, so some career experts feel like the cover letter is dead. I don't think so, because the last stats that I've read said pretty much about 50% of employers do look at the cover letter. You don't know which 50% you're going to get. So if they ask for a cover letter, you better have a cover letter in there. And even if they don't read it, they want to know that you can follow directions, right? As a part of the process to apply here, you need to send us a cover letter. If you totally disregard or skip that step, what does that say about your work ethic? Right? So definitely, I would say for sure, have a good, strong cover letter. And the problem with cover letters is why people don't tend to read them or think that they're dead or they're dying or do we really need them is because over time, they all started to sound the same, right? Robotic, I am applying for your position I saw on Indeed.com. Boring. This is boring stuff. So if you want your cover letter to get read, make it interesting. Start off with a very powerful statement versus your traditional everyday statement that everyone is saying in their cover letter. Again, showcase that value, right? Don't just say, I'm qualified and I love your company. Tell them how you're qualified and why you love their company. Dig a little deeper and put some time and effort into the cover letter, but they definitely are still a thing. Don't skip the cover letter, especially if they ask for it in the posting.
That's such great advice. And I think a lot of people, they struggle with, what to actually put in there. So I think, what you just said will really help them. And I think another important point is that it doesn't have to be a long cover letter. In fact, I went back and looked at the cover letter when I applied to LinkedIn, and it was like 178 words, which isn't long.
I try to keep mine 200 words or less.
That's great. Yeah. And I think, it's enough to get your point across without actually boring the person on the other side. So, that's great advice. And we have a question here from Randy that's almost a follow-up, which is, do they always need to be customized for the position? So how would you suggest people tackle that? Do they have to write a new one for every position?
I think for sure it is going to be much more advantageous to put something that is most relevant to that company in your cover letter, because it just shows that you did your homework, that you took your time to really research and make sure that you're making a bigger impression on them. They want to see that you actually want to work there. If you want to work for a company really, really badly, you're going to take some extra time and energy to talk about their company, specifically some of the challenges that they may be facing right now, and then putting yourself in there as the help or the solution that they've been looking for. If you take the time to do that, it's going to take you much further than just having a boilerplate cover letter that could go for anyone, right? When I was looking for help, I could tell the people who took the time to research the company and talk about what I do in a meaningful way. That speaks volumes.
Yeah. And I think, as a journalist and someone who writes for a living, and at least partially, one of the things that I always tell myself is when I struggle to write something, it means that I haven't done enough research yet. So, if you do enough research, I think the cover letter and anything you're writing really comes a lot easier. So it doesn't feel as much of a lift. So I think that research component is just so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great
And
point.
And we have questions coming in a little bit about job search strategy too. So we have one here from Chris, which is how do I get on the radar for jobs that are not posted? So a lot of people hear about the hidden job market. And for your clients, how do you tell them to go about looking for those jobs or to at least get an edge on jobs that may be just posted?
Yes. So I always say find people, not jobs. And this is because the way the system is set up when you apply online, it is not very effective. There's literally about a 1 to 4% success rate when you apply online. Okay. The odds are pretty much against you. And so I think it's so important for people to put their eggs in multiple baskets, right? And when you talk about the hidden job market, it sounds so mysterious, but it's really not that mystical. It's pretty much you creating relationships with people. So you find people, not jobs. So who are the people, right? We're talking about hiring managers. So think about, okay, I want to be a VP of marketing. Who is my future boss going to be, right? Maybe the chief marketing uh, executive, maybe the senior VP of marketing. So you find those people on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is very powerful. You could use it to kind of search for people at specific companies by job title. So now you find those people and you reach out to them directly. Even if there's nothing posted, you're on their radar. If they're making the hiring decisions and you send them your information and they take a look at it, you've made an impact on them. So I've had clients who have gotten opportunities created for them because they put themselves out there, posting or no posting, to the person who was in a position to hire them, or in a position to advocate for them, or in a position to refer them. And so that's really what it's all about, the people and the connections. And I think right now is a wonderful time to do this because of what's been happening with the coronavirus. Everyone's at home, everyone's networking virtually. So it's not frowned upon for you to reach out to someone online.
Definitely. And I think also something that's important to remember is that even if a person you reach out to, maybe their company isn't hiring or they don't know of any leads, it doesn't mean that that won't happen down the road. I know I've been in a position where I've talked to people about my career and, a year later, I'll get a call from someone who says, Bob recommended you. Or, this guy that maybe I only talked to 3 times said that I should talk to you. And that's happened a few times for me. So even if it doesn't pay a dividend right away, it may down the road. And that's such an important point, just to sort of reach out and have that conversation, especially now when people might have some free time on their hands. So that's great.
Happy
Yeah, and then we have a question here too, and I think this comes up quite a bit from Stuart. Should you apply for a position that has been reposted, and how many times? Because I think a lot of people they might see a position disappear and then reappear. So how should people navigate those positions when they've already applied, maybe?
Right. So if you applied the first time and didn't hear back and then it went away and it got reposted, if you apply again in the same fashion with the same resume, chances are it's going to be the same result, right? So if you're really interested, I would make a phone call, send an email, and say, hey, I noticed this position. I was really interested in it. Can I ask a few questions about the role? So that way you kind of get some inside information, maybe some more details about what they're looking for specifically. You may need to tweak your resume. But I wouldn't say don't apply again, just don't apply the same way because whatever you did the first time clearly didn't work. Something didn't mesh, right? So tweak and readjust and go ahead and try again if you're really that interested in the position. But even further, try to find the person who posted it, the recruiter who posted it, the hiring manager, and ask some questions so that you can get a better idea of what exactly, why you missed the mark maybe the first time and what exactly they're looking for so you can adjust and reapply.
That's such great advice because in fact, I remember someone who reached out to me saying that they had applied to the same employer. It was a large employer, like 30 times, and they didn't hear back. And I just sort of said, you got to do something different, reach out to them or even, call them and just see, what you're a fit for, and don't just keep applying in the same manner. So that's fantastic advice. And we have a question here, and this is something I think a lot of people struggle with because they've been told that they need to customize their resume. But a LinkedIn profile is maybe a little bit harder to customize for each position, and you don't want to be changing it every day, not knowing when a recruiter's looking at it. So we have a question from William, which is, how do you combine your resume with your LinkedIn profile? Do you need a different narrative? So how should people walk that line?
Definitely you want to keep the same narrative. So hopefully you sat back and decided this is the direction I want to take in my career. And so now you can brand yourself accordingly on LinkedIn and on the resume. The last thing you want to do is apply somewhere, they read the resume, they love it, and then they research you and find you on LinkedIn and you have a whole different persona. That throws them off and they're confused now, right? So definitely keep the same narrative. You want to have a cohesive brand across the board. And so if you are looking for positions, make sure that the positions you're looking for are all relatively related so that people don't get confused if they read your profile. The about section is a great place to kind of just demonstrate your brand and what you're looking for, and make sure that that is clear so the reader understands. Even if you dabble in a couple of different things, there's a nice way that you can weave it all together. So again, if they're here to look for a marketing person, they can catch the marketing expertise, even if you dabble in maybe some consulting or something else.
Definitely. And I think one tip that I always add is, and I see this a lot, is people who write in sort of the third person. So like I call it the Elmo voice, where they always say, Andrew did X, Y, and Z. And we know that you don't have someone writing this for you in most cases. So if a person's looking at it, it just feels weird that you're talking about yourself from a distant perspective. So it's always better to be that person who says, like, I did this, or when I was at this company, or something like that. So don't use Elmo's voice when writing your LinkedIn profile. That's my advice.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is your personal profile, your profile. So we know it's you. So yeah, just
exactly. And we have a question here, and this is from Dishti, which is, broadly, she's asking, how do you network in the current pandemic? And then she asked possible tips on how to start conversations with recruiters on LinkedIn. And I think this is something people sometimes struggle with, is about like how to take that first leap to actually get in touch with someone. So what's your advice for that?
So if you are reaching out to a recruiter for a specific position that they have posted, express your interest in said position, attach your resume, give a quick blurb about why you're perfect for the job. That's one approach. Another approach could be, hey, I saw you posted this position. I have a few questions. Do you have 5 minutes to answer them for me? Because what you want to happen is that connection. Like I said before, find people, not jobs, right? So if you are able to get someone on the phone, it's going to be much more memorable for them that you are on their radar for a certain position versus sending an email or a message. Because guess what? Everybody's sending them messages about these positions that they're posting. But if they are looking for someone actively, they're going to sift through because they're looking for a good candidate. So make sure that you're strong and you get to the point. Recruiters do not have a lot of time. They're not going to read an essay. Like, tell them what you want to say, reference the specific position, send over the resume, and see if you can get them on the phone to ask them questions. That's one approach. Now, if we're talking about maybe a hiring manager that doesn't have a posting and you just want to literally network and get on their radar, compliment them on their background. Hey, I saw you worked at this place and you moved up the ranks. How impressive, and just kind of start the conversation like that, because people like compliments and they like to talk about themselves. So maybe you could dig a little deeper and say, I would love to learn a little bit more about how you made that how you maneuver through the company so fast or whatnot, and see if you can get them on the phone or invite them to an informational interview, right? So, hey, have my eyes on this particular type of role. I see you've been in this for quite a while. I would love if you have 15 minutes to spare over coffee virtually to tell me a little bit more about your journey in this industry. And, those are some of the ways you can kind of spark conversation. What you don't want to do is seem like you're asking for a handout, right? Hey, you hiring? I need a job. Here's my resume. Hey, can you please do something for me, right? Without somehow making them feel good about the transaction, about the conversation, without making them feel like it's about them. we are in human nature self-absorbed in a bit, right? So if it's not anything in it for us, we're less likely to respond in a positive way. So make it about the other person.
Yes, and I can't stress the brevity point enough, or sort of the getting to the point, because even now, like, I get pitched by a lot of PR people about things to write about, and the people that I've responded most to are people who send very short, here's what I'm writing about. Are you interested? Yes or no? Instead of sending me like 300 words. That's usually the best time to get me, is because if I'm going about my day, that's what I can respond to. But something very long and sort of rambling isn't something that's really useful to me. So that is such a great point on brevity, and I think that applies to so many positions and communications. I think that's great. And we have follow-up questions, one from Maria in the stream, which is, how many times do you follow up and when do you stop? And I think, a lot of people, they might submit an application, they may get asked for more materials, and they'll follow up and they'll follow up. But how, what is that dance like? When do you stop sort of following up?
Yeah, I think you follow up as long as you don't have a yes or a no. Until you get a yes or a no, I think the other person has some level of accountability to respond to you if you've already initiated and had some interaction, right? So if it's a cold conversation and this person has not responded at all, then at some point you just stop. But if you've had an interview, for example, and you want to know if it's a yes or no, I would definitely continue to follow up. Not every day. So let's say you had an interview today, you would follow up in the morning. Thank you so much. I enjoyed our conversation, XYZ. Let me know next steps, etc. If you don't hear back from them within 2 or 3 days, you could follow up again. Hey, just reaching out. So I didn't hear back from you. I'm really excited about this position. Let me know if there's any further questions you may have. But the key is you want to try to get the gauge first. So figure out, if you can ask them, when can I expect to hear back from you? Or when are you expecting to fill this role? So you have it in your head when to expect something, and then give them the time to respond within that time frame, and then follow up if you haven't heard back.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that I always add is sort of be courteous in your communications, even if you think they're ghosting you, even if they haven't responded after, 5 or 6 tries, because there are so many things that can be beyond a recruiter's control, or they may even be on vacation. They may have had a family emergency. So you want to leave that door open in case maybe something like that happened, and you don't want to spoil the opportunity or burn your bridge in case there's a chance you're going to go across it. So I always say, be nice.
Yes, absolutely.
And we have questions here about transferable skills. And I think a lot of people actually during the pandemic have decided, now that I've had time to reflect, I really want to change what I'm doing. So for people who are trying to switch careers, like Sue, she's basically saying, I am a hospitality professional looking to switch industries. When you have a lot of transferable skills, how do you sell that on a resume for an industry maybe you haven't worked in before?
Yes, great question. So the first thing is to understand what the skill sets are that are needed for the new position. Okay. So industry is different from job function, right? So I could be a marketing professional in the logistics industry, and then now I want to take my marketing skills to the technology industry, right? So then the focus becomes my skills in terms of job function. I may not be 100% savvy in the industry jargon for the new industry, but the skill set is there, okay? So it's important to understand the difference. Now, if you want to switch functions, so you want to move from, I don't know, sales into teaching, okay? Now you have to look at the skill sets and the industry. So therefore, here's what I mean. If you want to switch, you have to understand, like, okay, now a teacher needs to have listening skills. They have to be able to teach, of course. They have to be able to present. They have to be articulate. So those skills surely have shown up in your career before. So when you write the resume, now you need to emphasize those skills versus the specific things you did as a marketer. Okay. So in marketing, maybe you presented some information to your president or to customers, to clients. Those skills are now going to be transferable to teaching because you're able to present, articulate, convey information, get engagement, etc. And so you have to really sit down and figure out what are the skill sets needed for the new role and say, I have this skill, and this skill. Great. Now I need to go back to the resume and make sure I'm highlighting those specific skills with stories of success and different um, um, projects I've worked on, etc. So that those things come to the forefront versus calling yourself a teacher and everything you say is I teach, I teach, I teach, or I'm a marketing person and I marketed this and marketed that, right? Now you shift the focus to I presented to an audience of 35 or whatnot. So that's relevant to a teacher because they're going to be presenting information to a group as well.
Yeah. And, another thing about resumes, and I've seen just a ton of questions about this in the stream, is applicant tracking systems, which I sometimes call resume sorting robots, even though some people don't like that term. But for people who are out there concerned about applicant tracking systems, what is your advice to them? Because I think a lot of people, they almost get too concerned about them.
I have to totally agree with you, right? Because I just said, if you apply online, there's literally about a 1 to 4% success rate, even if you do it right. And the thing that people don't realize about applicant tracking systems, if they think they could beat the system, they're like, can I beat the system? I need to make sure that this beats the system and I get through. There is no guarantee. I don't care if you copy and paste the entire job description into your resume. You cannot beat the system. Here's why. There's things going on the back end that you don't even recognize is happening. People who set up this system, sometimes they set certain parameters so you will never get through and you won't know why. For example, I only want people that live within a 20-mile radius of this zip code. So now if you're in the 21st mile, you're out automatically, right? So yes, there are things that you could do for sure to make sure that you score higher and that you raise your chances of getting through. But please recognize that there are other things that may be working against you. That's why I'm such a big advocate of finding people, not jobs. So even after you apply, you think you tweaked it around and it's great and you hear crickets, who can you follow up with, right? Who posted it? Who would be your boss? You could go through the job description. A lot of times they say who the position reports to in terms of their title. You can go do some digging, do some research, call up the company and say, hey, I just applied. I would love to get some information about this position. What you want is an email address or a phone number or contact to reach your hiring authority, because that's really where the magic happens. Because guess what? If they get their hands on your resume and they love it and they want you, there's no system, no recruiter, no HR personnel that's going to stop them from saying, I need her or him in my office. So
yeah, definitely. And I think that, that's why I always like to think of a job search as almost like a holistic process, because there's so many different pieces that people need to have as part of their process. It's not just sort of one trick or one sort of gaming the system. It's basically about everything you're doing as part of the process to make sure you're successful ultimately. So I think, that's such a great point about sort of, it's not just about applying online. There's so many different parts about it. It's about networking. It's about getting to the right person. And that actually brings me to a question that I thought was really good that came in ahead of the show. And I know I've been in this situation before. And it's from Ravi, and it says, how do you get in touch with the hiring manager without pestering the recruiter or making the recruiter angry? What do you suggest in those cases? Should you deal with the recruiter or should you try get to the hiring manager?
So I think it depends on the scenario. So if you've been working with a recruiter and excuse me, they are, pushing you along in the process, and now you want to kind of go around them, that's a little disrespectful, right? Because I'm here as your advocate. A lot of times recruiters become your advocate because they want to see you succeed. They want you to get hired, right? So if that's the case, then that's a big no-no. Don't do that. Definitely work with the recruiter that you have in front of you. Now, if there is no recruiter and you're literally just looking for opportunities, I always tell my clients, if you can, try to bypass the recruiters because technically they're kind of gatekeepers. They're there to kind of weed you out in a sense. Not that they're not helpful and they're not a great route to go to, but again, if you could get to the decision maker, the recruiter can't necessarily stop you from getting that call. So you definitely don't want to go around a recruiter if you've been working with them. Um, yeah, don't do that.
Definitely. And also, I think, it's one of those things where a lot of companies have like internal policies where they might say, hey, listen, I really have to give you to the recruiter before the hiring manager, because the recruiter's job is to almost, like you said, wade through, all the applicants to make sure that the best of the best is getting to the hiring manager. So, sometimes you're just going to get stymied and it may not look good to keep pestering or so it's almost like if you worry that you're pestering them, that might be a good sign to stop. and I think we have time for one more question, and it's about sort of making your resume stand out, and I know we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but we have a question from Rodrigo. And how do you draw attention to your resume? So there's a lot of people who say add graphics, add color, add all that stuff. But for people who really want to stand out, and especially among the sea of job seekers, what's your best advice to them?
So if you really want to stand out with your resume, I have a 4-prong approach, right? It's called the live resume system. Live is an acronym. It needs to look good, be intentional, value-based, and enticing. So that's my approach to writing resumes that are going to stand out. Because think about it. When you look at anything, a book cover, an email, right? A resume, before you read a word, you've already prejudged in your head something about it, right? The book is going to be boring. The email is going to be boring. The resume is going to be boring, right? So the first thing is catch the eye of the reader. Because if you think about this, people who review resumes like a lot of resumes. So when they start to all look the same, it's going to be hard for them to pause and say, oh, this one. So yes, I do agree that adding a flash of color definitely helps, but then it needs to be intentional as well. So even if it looks good and then they read it and it still sounds mundane, then it still didn't work, right? So now you need to have the intent behind how you strategically write about your background. So is it focused? Meaning, do we know exactly? I say, if someone could pick up your resume off the street, read it, and say, I know exactly what this person does, then your resume is intentional. Okay. So you need to make sure that it's clear what you're good at, what job you're best suited for, etc. Then it needs to be value-based. We talked about this already. Show those accomplishments. They love numbers. Put some metrics in there. Show the scope and the level of which you operate. If you have a budget, tell us how big the budget was. If you have a team, tell us how big the team was. If you save money, how much money did you save? That gets us excited, right? We want to know how you're going to come in and be a superstar for our company. So definitely make sure that value is there. And then the last piece, make it enticing. Okay. What is unique about you? What is special? That, I think that last piece is really the part that makes you go above the rest. Because if everyone is equal in terms of, they all have a nice laid out resume, they all have the good keywords and it's clear what they're looking for, and they all have some accomplishments, the only last thing to set them apart is the special, the uniqueness, the differentiating factor. And that's something I love to definitely focus on, because I think everyone has something different to bring to the table. And there's something unique about each and every person that can hear me right now. What is that thing, right? It may be that you speak 5 languages. It may be that you are well-traveled, right? And you have cultural sensitivity, right? Bringing those extra little pieces, that make you is definitely, in addition to all those other things, going to make sure that you definitely stand out.
That's such wonderful advice. And I think that's one of the reasons I always tell people about finding the right job and not just a job. It's because, everyone's unique and there are unique jobs out there. So it's trying to find the one that matches you best for this current time. So I think that's such wonderful advice. And thank you for all the advice you gave. I think our members learned a lot. Thank you so much. And I hope you were all following Melanie. At the bottom of the screen, we had her LinkedIn profile that was being shown. So be sure you follow her. She posts a ton of great advice. And to all of you out there, I hope you'll join us next week. We'll have Chelsea Jay on the show talking all about job searching. She is an advocate for building a career with purpose. So be sure to tune in next Friday at that time. And then we'll also, be back every day at noontime. We have LinkedIn News Live. So on Fridays, it's Get Hired Live, but every other day it's LinkedIn News Live. So be sure to tune in for that. And until then, as always, please follow your local health advice. So making sure you're staying well. You can only be a good candidate. You can only get a job if you're healthy and well enough to do so. So I hope you do that. And until then, be well, stay well, and I look forward to seeing you here on Friday.